Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this Tuesday night, September 8, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Opening story tonight, friends, we have footage that has emerged of the moment when torrential storms in southeast Spain caused flash floods and washed cars and trucks along a street. Fifty homes, 30 shops, and 200 cars were damaged when water swept through the town of Adra in the province of Almeria yesterday. Heavy downfalls particularly affected the regions of Andalusia, Murcia, and Valencia, with more than 300 rain-related incidents being reported to the emergency services. In the province of Granada, 3 men drowned when they were caught in rising water. The footage you just saw, friends, was courtesy of Francisco Fernandez. And that name reminds me a little bit of old friend Mario Hernandez and his mother, Mrs. Hernandez. Friends, that first story, let's bring our chart up quickly for a moment here at the beginning of the program tonight. That first story relates to the fourth seal, in the sense that between the third and the fifth seal, Christ said there would be seismic activity, seismic conditions, commotions in the air, and commotions on the ground. And this one was a commotion on the ground that begins in the air with rains and flooding and that kind of thing. Now, our next story and several stories after this are also going to relate to that fourth seal, in the sense that, if you can see on the bottom of it, I've got pinned in there something Christ said in Mark 13 at verse 8, and only Mark recorded this, where Christ said between the third and fifth seal there would be trouble. He used the Greek word terike, which means roiling waters, trouble, both figuratively and literally, and in the figurative sense, mobs, seditions, and that relates to what's happening, mob, seditions, and just trouble. That relates to what's happening overseas in Europe with the migrant and refugee situation. In Hungary, refugees are breaking through the Hungarian police line at the border. Hundreds of people who had been camping in a cornfield broke through a Hungarian police line on the county's border with Serbia. The Hungarian government's decision to concentrate resources on its border fence rather than on creating a humanitarian infrastructure is causing tension. Anna Halligan reports from Roszke. I guess you pronounce that Roszke. Okay, Anna Halligan.
The refugees, I would say between 200, 300, have just broken through the police lines back at the camp on the border, and they're now marching. They say that they're planning to march all the way to Budapest. Their big fear is that the authorities here will take their fingerprints. They've been chanting, no fingerprints, because they're afraid that if their fingerprints are taken, then they could be returned to Hungary. out of the hundreds who broke out of the camp there, these are the few who were picked up by police and now being taken to the camp.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much. Syria's civil war, friend, continues to have a devastating effect, and more than 4 million people have fled the country in search of safety. Another 7.5 million are internally displaced. That's right, 7.5. We're not talking thousands, we're talking millions. Another 7.5 million are internally displaced, and the violence continues to claim lives on a daily basis. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen reports from Latakia.
This is Yarmouk's skeleton. It was a Palestinian refugee camp for families who were forced out of Israel in another war. No civilians are left on this side, controlled by Palestinian fighters and the Syrian army. Some families, the fighters said, are heading to Europe. 400 meters away are jihadists from Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, and thousands of trapped civilians. Europe is waking up belatedly to the consequences of having a major war, a series of wars, right on its doorstep. The immense movement of people caused by war will continue to pose Europe big challenges, perhaps for years, because this war has a lot of killing left in it. The Middle East is knocking on Europe's doors, and it's not going to go away. The beaches in Latakia on Syria's Mediterranean coast could be in a different country. Children still play in the waves here, instead of dying in them. For the well-off, the sea is for fun, not escape. Latakia is the provincial capital and a regime stronghold. Because it's relatively safe, its population has more than doubled as it's absorbed 1.6 million Syrians who are refugees in their own country. That's twice as many as Germany is taking. 7,000 are at a camp at the sports centre. They're looked after well. The refugee crisis is created and driven by war. Allah's eldest son was killed fighting in the Syrian army, and another son was badly wounded. She escaped with her husband and 5 youngest children when Idlib, another provincial capital, fell to the opposition in March.
We started running. We passed by the armed groups, but thank God they didn't recognize us. I saw them in my own eyes. They were butchering a man and playing with his head. I ran away with my children, and for a week they couldn't stop crying and had nightmares.
At the military hospital in Latakia, they judge the ferocity of the fighting by the number of Syrian army casualties they receive.
It's a difficult time because of the number, a huge number, a lot of wounded at the same time.
Among hundreds of thousands of wounded, one estimate is that 80,000 Syrian army soldiers have been killed. That's more than the regular fighting strength of the British Army. This soldier didn't want to be identified. He lost his arm when Idlib fell.
I am in pain, and my mother can't know that. I don't want her to worry about me. Once I have got a new arm, I will go to see her.
In Jundaria village, everyone turned out after Jandab Numan was killed on the front line. They're Alawites, the army's backbone, from the same religious sect as the president. Syrian army attacks often create more refugees, and so do advances by jihadists. War makes people flee for their lives. After Jandab's last fusillade, they reported back to their units. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, in Syria.
And in that report, friends, you heard Jeremy Bowen say that the Middle East is knocking on Europe's door, and it's not going to go away soon. Now, let's cover next, friends, a report on how the Schengen area of the free EU movement was created.
Welcome to Schengen, right in the heartland of the European Union. And if you want to come this way, I'll give you some idea of the geography. Right now we're in Luxembourg, and you look over the other side of the Mosel River. On the left, that's Germany. And then over here on the right, that's France. It's a pretty unremarkable place, really, but it was here that the idea of a Europe free of internal border control, something many people see as one of the EU's greatest achievements, it was here that it all began. And from humble beginnings, 26 countries are now part of this rather unique experiment. Anyone can cross internal borders that have, for all intents and purposes, disappeared. But the huge influx of migrants and the EU's confused response has put Schengen under the spotlight as never before. Inside the museum, there are all sorts of memories and reminders of European integration, landmark moments, including this video of the signing of the Schengen Agreement, which took place on the river just outside, on the border between three countries, exactly 30 years ago. And over here, a rather fine collection of European customs officer hats, of course, no longer required. Up on the wall, there's a quote which sums up what Schengen is supposed to be about. The elimination of borders recognises the fact that all citizens belong to the same space and share the same identity. But it's that kind of idea of solidarity that has come under threat in recent weeks.
Of course, as Luxembourg citizen, I'm proud to be in Schengen. It's a sign of opening Europe and for more democracy in Europe.
Yes, because I come from France. I can go to work here, buy another things in Germany.
She says, yes, we can accept them, but it's not going to be easy, because a lot of them have such different traditions. And she says, France is a welcoming country, it's always been open to migrants, but she's not sure what they're going to do when they come here. There aren't enough jobs.
Hassle-free travel, crossing borders without any checks, it's something many Europeans now take for granted, unlike almost anywhere else in the world. But the current migrant crisis is putting all that under intense pressure. Politicians from Angela Merkel on down say something has to change. And if it doesn't, then the basic principles represented by a place like this will be called into question.
Schengen. Initially, not many countries were in the agreement, but it now includes almost every country in the European Union. As you heard, Chris Morris reporting from Schengen in Luxembourg on how the agreement came to be. There's an endless queue of migrants on the Greek holiday island. Long queues of migrants continue to queue on the Greek island of Lesbos, just desperate to get the paperwork they need to travel onto the mainland in Europe.
We came on the Turkish ferry. Safe, legal, the route of welcome. With our passports from countries that are free from war. No such peaceful transit for them. Some 20,000 Syrian refugees have arrived on this small island since the upsurge in this crisis.
We've just arrived in Lesbos and we've spent days on the other side in Turkey talking to Syrian refugees desperate to get here. And when they arrive on this first step of their European journey, this is what they find.
Europe has by now heard so much about their plight. Yet to each new arrival, their story is urgent. And moving on is imperative. Where do you want to get to?
والله يعني ناوي على النرويج إن شاء الله.
You want to get to Norway?
Norwich.
God willing. We've been here for 6 days, says Zahra from Aleppo, and we've spent all the money we had. Everybody wants to board the ferry for Athens, the next step on the journey. A pregnant woman swelters in the queue for tickets.
Well, you can hear the sound of police here keeping order, trying to keep order, shouting, "Keep a line." Everybody is waiting to get a ticket that will take them from Lesbos to Athens and then deeper into Europe.
At first, the line moves neatly. Then tempers fray. These scenes last night prompted the Greek authorities to warn they faced being overwhelmed. Syrians tried to force their way past guards and onto a ferry bound for Athens. This is the response for these new arrivals' speedy registration set up overnight by the Greeks and the UN. 7,000 were registered this morning and now will be allowed to move on, with more ships being brought in. But there was an appeal for urgent help from Europe from local officials.
We are now waiting for the fast response from the European institutions, because this issue is not a problem only for the islands, not only for Greece, but mainly a European and international issue, and must be dealt with in that way.
At the port, the press of people continues. An exhausted boy breaks down. Nobody knows how many more like him are coming, and if this Greek island will be able to cope. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Lesbos.
And from Fergal Keane in Lesbos, we go next over to the BBC's James Rinnell reporting from Presevo on the Serbia-Macedonia border, a main transit center for migrants wanting to travel on to other European countries. There, huge numbers of people are waiting outside a registration center to register and find somewhere to sleep.
Not everybody here has the strength or the energy to find a bus or a car and keep traveling. This line of refugees and migrants is waiting outside this registration or processing camp here in Preševo. The line stretches all along this road. Hundreds and hundreds of people are waiting to get to the front of the queue, where they'll register and they will get somewhere to sleep. A lot of these people from the Middle East have been traveling for more than 2 weeks now, and those particularly with families are so exhausted that they believe the best thing for them now is to stop and regather their strength for the journey north.
Okay, friends, and one more story on this before we go to some news about things happening in the United States with the release of Kim Davis. We'll talk about that in a moment. And another thing or two we'll get to. But first, one more story on the migrant thing. In Hungary, 2,700 new refugees entered the country yesterday, bringing the total for this year to 180,000 people. The Hungarian government's decision to concentrate resources on its border fence, as we mentioned a moment ago, rather than creating a humanitarian infrastructure, is creating desperate scenes. Nick Thorpe reports on the Hungarian-Serbian border.
This is the cornfield close to the Hungarian-Serbian border, just inside Hungary, where hundreds of people are camped now, thousands in the past days. It's just been ringed by police, and it's where the police ask people to wait for buses to take them to a pre-registration centre nearby. And just to give you a sense of the scale of this, these are tents provided by different aid agencies. They're also distributing food, and there's a small doctor's tent for those who need medical care. People have been making fires overnight. The temperatures have been falling to about 5 degrees Celsius. It's not a particularly pleasant place to spend the night. The fires have been made from rubbish. There is food, there are blankets. People here I've been speaking to say they are grateful, very grateful to the volunteers who've been coming both from Hungary and from other countries of Europe to help. People here from Germany as well this morning distributing food. The Hungarian churches are also involved. The Hungarian government has also been bringing food here. People say they've been treated relatively well by the police here. The police have been patient with them. They're now waiting for buses to be taken on. But it's not a pleasant place to spend many hours, let alone many days. There are very few toilets. Hygiene is very rudimentary here. People are in a hurry to move on, and hence the breakouts from this collection point in the past days. For the time being then, people having their breakfast, waking up, trying to stay warm and waiting patiently at this point for buses to take them to a pre-registration centre just a couple of kilometres down the road.
And friends, you know, Europe is a mix of Gentile countries and modern-day tribes of Israel. Let's put our slide up on the screen for a moment that shows where the tribes of Israel are today. And you can see many of them are in Europe. Now, what's happening is with this great influx of what you would call practicing heathens, or some are calling them that no one understands biblical terminology on it, but these many thousands of practicing heathens who neither, nice people, but religious-wise, they're heathens, who neither know nor care to know the history and culture of the tribes of Israel, the descendants of the tribes of Israel. And these thousands are flooding into Britain, Western Europe, Canada, and the United States, too. Austria seems to be the only Western culture to have a handle on this what is a major problem. It's going to prove to be a major problem. Hundreds of thousands per year are being transported, settled, and supported in the U.S. alone, where Muslims, many of whom by their own admission support terrorism to bring about Sharia law, and they're being secretly settled in the United States. They come from Somalia, Libya, Iraq, Syria. You name the terrorist backwater, here they come. Criminals and illiterates from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, along with some from the Middle East and Africa, are flooding over the southern border on a daily basis. And, the word is out. The current administration seems to be on the side of everybody but the people that the United States Constitution says they're supposed to represent. But Europe-wise, Bible prophecy tells us that Europe will undergo profound changes that will catapult the whole world in these last days. It won't be some politically correct version of democracy, but a union of 10 nations with a tremendous economic and military power. It'll be as Mr. Herbert Armstrong put it, it'll be a political union of 10 nations. That's one element, a political union. And that political union of those 10 nations will have an economic union, probably still that single currency of the euro, which is becoming stronger, and military power. And we see military power developing right under our noses with none of the allies even blinking an eye about it out of Germany. Now, this is certainly not the case right now. Europe, with the exception of Germany, is weak, but many are not taking kindly to the unabated influx of Middle Eastern and African Muslims. And, we need to think that's what the people that are coming in there by the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, are Muslims, Middle Eastern and African Muslims. And there's a movement already underway that has gained a political foothold in Central Europe. Several governments that were proclaiming diversity as beneficial until recently have realized what a mistake it is. But there's a good look at where the tribes of Israel are, which are going to be affected by, God promised blessings to the end-time Israel nations. And this influx of people coming in are going to take away those blessings. And that's not only affecting Europe, that's presently also affecting the United States, the way our southern border has been neglected. So let's go on to a story that relates to the second seal. You'll see the second column over, depicting the second seal. In the book of Revelation, that second seal is depicted by a red horse, which Jesus Christ described in the Gospels in plain language as war and rumors of war. And that'll also dovetail with the fourth seal element of, where I peg it anyway, because of it being cited by Christ as being between the third and fifth seal of terrorcade, just trouble, mob, seditions, just trouble, but internally within countries. This next story, indigenous leaders in Brazil have accused the government there of pursuing a deliberate policy of genocide after a Guarani Indian leader was killed in the west of the country. The man was shot dead, as you'll see in this video, or as you'll learn about in this video, while he was trying to retake some land. Here is our reporter, the BBC reporter, Ryer Davies, reporting from Mato Grosso do Sul.
The fight for land rights in Brazil is as old as the country itself. It's often brutal and sometimes fatal. The sorrow and pain on these faces reflecting another tragedy for the Guarani Kaiowa people as they pay respect to a young indigenous leader, murdered, they say, during an attempt to reoccupy their ancestral lands. They, the farmers, shot Semiao in cold blood, says his friend Inaye, as we watch harrowing footage of the aftermath. They deliberately target our leaders, she says, but we're not giving up. Now, this is the spot where the indigenous leader, 24-year-old Semiao, was shot and killed, according to the indigenous people, by a hired gun hired by the ranchers who was on the other side of the river. Now, the Guarani say all of this has been legally designated as their land, and they've only invaded after more than a decade of government inaction. And they say they'll stay here and fight, even if it means more people are killed. Some 1,500 Guarani have now occupied 10,000 hectares of farmland in the western state of Mato Grosso do Sul. Men, women and children returning to a place they call home after decades of discrimination.
A gente chama que é uma política até de genocídio, né? Porque this is a deliberate policy of genocide. It's a long legal process designed to kill our people, slowly but surely. Our rights are violated and we don't have even the basic conditions to survive. So we have no choice but to occupy, to retake our lands. Otherwise, we can't survive as a people.
Ranchers have long been part of Brazil's drive for development into the interior and into conflict with indigenous people. While some farmers have taken their cattle and moved on from the disputed land, others are refusing to move. Like most ranchers, Gino Ferreira has legal titles to his fazenda or farm. He blames the government for doing nothing while an inevitable conflict loomed.
Eu tenho uma propriedade rural. O que eu tenho?
This is my family's land, says Gino. If the Indians arrive and take it over, what do you think I'm going to do? Lose all I've worked for? For now, Brazil's army is keeping the two sides apart, preventing new land invasions and more retribution. The Guarani may have succeeded in recovering some of what was historically theirs, but it's come at a high price, and their lives are still burdened by poverty and discrimination. Bura Davis, BBC News, Mato Grosso do Sul.
Friends, on our next story, it relates to, well, let's bring that chart back up just for a moment and let's point it out there. On the far left side, the first column is a white column and a little white horse at the top. The first seal of the book of Revelation is depicted as a white horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language to be religious deception, false Christ, false apostles, etc. Now, this next story kind of reminds you going back a few years in the Church of God when God gave Mr. Herbert Armstrong a new understanding regarding 1 Corinthians 7 that he announced was for the church, and Paul's way of announcing it said it's not necessarily of God, it's of me, but he was an apostle and was able to bind and loosen things, and he loosened up things a little bit. He takes the responsibility for that. Well, Mr. Armstrong, God's end-time apostle, in harmony with the Apostle Paul, loosened it up too, and even had warned a few months before, if we ever do make some changes like that, you'll see all kind of people perhaps taking wrongful advantage of it and avoiding counsel and just jumping off the side of the ship and seeing all kind of divorces and remarrying. Well, Pope Francis is announcing something that the Catholic Church is saying may have same kind of tendency you'll see. Pope Francis is going to simplify the process that allows married couples to split and remarry within the Catholic Church. Until now, so-called annulments have been slow and expensive, but they are being reformed. The Catholic Church it's the only way couples who want to divorce can remain within the church and take communion, as Ben Bland reports.
According to Catholic Church teaching...
Okay. Friends, you know what I'm going to have to do? There is some music in this report for which I may not have licensing for our archive videos. So let me roll this again, and I'm going to read there's captions throughout. And for those of you who are listening by podcast, I'm just going to read those to you. And I apologize to Ben Bland, but with that music that we may not have a license for in the background, I can't roll it with the audio and put it in our archive. So let's do it this way. Now, even though I said this is Ben Bland with the report, because of the music, as I just mentioned to those of you live, I can't roll the audio with that music under it because we don't have the license for the music. But we're going to roll it with the captions, and for those on listening by podcast, I'm going to read those captions to you. So I'll try to keep up with them, and here's this video on this story. The Catholic teaching that marriage is forever is being changed. Divorced people can only remarry outside the church. Not allowed to receive holy union unless the marriage is annulled. Lack of free will, psychological maturity are the subtitles. Openness to having children. Decree of nullity is slow and expensive. Local dioceses can make the decision. Must be reviewed by a tribunal. Contested cases go to Vatican Appeal Court. Pope asked lawyers to make process simpler and quicker. What you were seeing or hearing in the subtitles was the former complicated way it was done in the Catholic Church, but the Pope is now asking the lawyers for the Catholic Church to make the process simpler and quicker. It's unlikely to change the teaching on divorce, likely to become easier to prove marriage invalid, which is an annulment process versus the divorce process. Allowing people to remarry and participate in quote-unquote church life. All right, that's the video on that. Now, friends, we've got our last story for tonight. We've got one that many people in the United States will be interested in. County Clerk Kim Davis from the U.S. state of Kentucky, who was jailed for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, has been released on the condition she does not interfere with her deputies when they issue such licenses. The U.S. Supreme Court declared same-sex marriage legal in June, but Kim Davis said that her Christian faith should exempt her from signing the licenses. Speaking shortly after her release, Ms. Davis spoke of her love for her supporters and said she wanted to give glory to God. 2 federal courts and the U.S. Supreme Court have ruled against Ms. Davis after she repeatedly refused to issue marriage licenses since June, and we have video.
You all so much. I love you all so very much. I just want to give God the glory. His people have rallied, and you are a strong people. We serve a living God who knows exactly where each and every one of us is at. Just keep on pressing. Don't let down, because He is here. And He's worthy. He's worthy. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
Friends, there is something we can give thanks for, that there are still some people standing for one of the ways of God related to the institution of marriage. And, you know, it keeps us just a short leg away from being like Sodom and Gomorrah, that seemed the whole city, except for Lot and his family, were into sodomy. We're still a little bit away from that, because there are some people, as I just said, who are taking a stand for God's way in related to marriage. That's it, friends, for this Tuesday night. You should have some material that will help you be on your knees praying as Christ instructed us in Luke 21:36 to be watching the events that relate to the first 4 seals and praying about them with your whole heart. He said, praying always from the bottom of your heart. And he said, with the promise, if you do this, you can be accounted worthy to escape the next things to happen in prophecy, which, let me flash this up real quickly for you here. Right after these first 4 seals, you see the 5th seal on the far right side in that column, labeled as Great Tribulation, with the guillotine at the top. And that's a time of a great martyrdom of God's saints. It'll be the time of the revived Holy Roman Empire, a 7th and final head to be crowned by 10 nations in Europe. And it'll be the time of God's 2 witnesses. It'll be the time when those who are accounted worthy to escape are taken to a place that God prepares for nourishment, protection, final training. And it'll also be the time of What all did I mention here? Let me come out of that real quick. I'm actually trying to exit out of here, but let's see. Let's pull these slides up and go to this one where I have a picture of the crown of the Holy Roman Empire in the middle of it, and I've got a list of things that happened. I mentioned the great martyrdom of God's saints. I mentioned the revival of the Holy Roman Empire, and that emperor will commence round 3 of World War. I mentioned how God's elect who are accounted worthy to escape the Philadelphia era will be flown to a place of protection, safety, and God's 2 witnesses will then commence at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, will commence 3.5 years of testimony around the world, and the whole world will see them, and we don't know who they are yet, but then at that time we will know. And I mentioned to you that element that's listed there, the time of the greatest martyrdom of God's saints, which you, if you are watching daily, getting on your knees and praying about these events, can be accounted worthy to escape. Friends, that's it for this Tuesday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Wednesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbert, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbert. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.